After 17 days of war, US President Donald Trump seems to be changing his mind. Addressing the media on board Air Force One, he suggested that maybe the US should not have gotten involved in Israel's war with Iran. Listen to this.
But we did it. It's almost, you could say we did it out of habit, which is not a good thing to do. But we did it because we have some good allies there. We have some great Middle Eastern countries there, Israel there. So we did it for a lot of reasons.
We did it for a lot of reasons. We have some good allies there. We did it out of habit. Well, Trump told reporters that one of his predecessors told him he wished he had been the one to bomb Iran.
And he said, I wish I did what you did. Could have done it. Other presidents, somebody should have done it. 47 years this went on. They call Iran the bully of the Middle East. And you could have never had the Abraham Accords. You could never have had peace in the Middle East. Now you're going to have peace.
When asked by a reporter to elaborate on which president he was speaking of, Trump did not specify.
I just want to ask you about something very interesting that you said twice today. That you talked to another former president about the Iran strikes.
I did.
Was it George W. Bush?
No.
Was it Bill Clinton?
I don't want to say.
But Trump further said that Iran's retaliatory strikes on neighboring countries hosting American military bases came as a surprise to Washington, claiming that no one had anticipated such a move. However, reports suggest the US president was warned that attacks on Iran could trigger retaliation against Gulf allies. Sources cited in the report said pre-war intelligence assessment did not say that Iran's response was a guarantee, but it certainly was on the list of outcomes. Over the past 2 weeks, Iranian drones and missiles have struck targets in the Gulf states that have included US military bases and an Emirates base hosting French troops, civilian structures, including hotels, airports, and energy facilities. Sources also said that Trump was told that Tehran will likely seek to close the Strait of Hormuz if attacked. Iran has halted almost all shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of oil supplies move, causing global energy prices to spike. All right, to discuss this further, I'm now being joined on the broadcast by Berzin Wagmar, Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS, University of London. Thanks so much for making time for us. Let's quickly go over the courts. We do this for very good allies in the Middle East, none of whom, as of now, are standing with the US. Gulf nations not standing in terms of retaliating to Iran. No action coming out from the Gulf. European countries do not want to have any part of it. Japan, South Korea, Australia, they don't want to have any part of it. Is there a sense that Trump administration is re-evaluating their decisions for Iran, given the statements that we just played in the report earlier?
Well, reevaluation happens during a wartime period on a daily basis, so that's nothing new. But you mentioned about the GCC allies, and President Trump rightly stated that we did it for our GCC allies, for whom Iran has been an existential threat for the last 47 years. In more ways than one, trying to topple those regimes, as we know only too well through coups in Bahrain in December 81 and the like. So there is a pattern to all this. And what has happened is, despite the GCC allies urging Mr. Trump to stay his hand and not execute this war, and they have maintained so far, despite taking hits, a defensive position and not an offensive one, as you can tell, yet Iran has been unceasing and relentless in attacking them. So they have gone now and stiffened Mr. Trump's spine to go ahead and carry out the job. And if anything, it would be the worst of all worldly scenarios for them if Mr. Trump does not continue doing what he does, because a wounded, beleaguered Iran would lash out at them should the US halt airstrikes. And speaking of airstrikes, what has been achieved tangibly needs to be put into focus, which is not spoken about. We talk about doubts and mixed signals coming out of DC. But for example, there are tangible empirical facts. For example, on the first day of the war, February 28th, Iran hurtled 350 ballistic missiles. By 14th March, it has come down to approximately 25. On the first day of war again, February 28th, Iran deployed 800 drones. By 14th March, it is now approximately 75. That tells you the system has been whittled away gradually. Talking about the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's naval assets have been liquidated in more ways than one, including minecrafts, sweepers, midget submarines, and the like. Yes, there is the threat of mine sweeping because Iran has, considerable expertise at that during the Iran-Iraq war. But take the Tehran airspace, Iranian airspace, not just Tehran, for example. The Americans rule Iranian skies because B-1 non-stealth bombers casually can fly through Iranian airspace without being attacked, because fixed radar installations have all been destroyed as such. So that should give you a perspective on what things are. You spoke about the oil factor, and that is a cause of anxiety. But then who depends on the Strait of Hormuz for most of its oil as such? China. 38% of its supplies come from through the Strait of Hormuz, because China is the only one who's been buying Iranian oil. About 90% of Iran's remittances in the last few years has been coming solely from Beijing.
Understood. Mr. Bagmar, I hear your point. There is no denying the fact that Iran has taken a good amount of beating at this point. Damage would be the right word to use, a major damage being caused. But let's also look at some more facts that while the theocratic regime, the former supreme leader was assassinated, was killed on the first day of the war, but then there is a new leader now. Let's look at the Strait of Hormuz. That is under an Iranian blockade. It's pretty much up to the Iranians who they're allowing to pass at this point. When we look at US bases across West Asia, they're all under attack at this point on a daily basis. So Iran has not stopped attacking. It has reduced in numbers, no doubt, but those drones are still causing a good amount of damage across the Gulf nations. The Gulf nations, on the other hand, are taking that beating. They're not retaliating in an offensive manner. They are only defending themselves even now. But that perhaps is also a risk of being on the same side as Israel if they also start attacking a fellow Muslim country. So there are a lot of complications in the region. But do you feel Iran is out of the fight given these facts as well?
No, it's not completely out of the fight, because for that you have to understand the psychosis of this regime, which is a Shia apocalyptic regime predicated on millenarianism and martyrdom. And they would not necessarily cave in as such, at least not yet. Now, that's what Iran analysts like myself and others have been watching for. And you are right to concede that so far the regime has consolidated itself with the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, and the IRGC, who has taken front, right and center position in consolidating the state, the Revolutionary Guards, in that Iran has evolved into what is a securitized oligarchy, military oligarchy. It is a security state like next door Pakistan. Replace Pakistan army with the IRGC and much else falls in place. So that should tell you how things are going. They have consolidated position. The point is, that is also a reason why we've not seen protests again occurring after the last very, very vociferous bout of protests of December and January, when all 31 provinces revolted. But it's a question of time, because it still is a discredited regime on borrowed time, completely shorn of legitimacy, and its self-sabotaging tactics don't exactly help it in the long and medium-term run.
Also, Mr. Bagmar, when Donald Trump says that we were shocked at the way Iran retaliated, there is nothing that Iran, honestly, at this point is doing which they did not say that they will do. Strait of Hormuz, they made it clear we will block it. They said we'll go after all your bases in West Asia. They're doing that. Also, at this point, there were already 2 aircraft carriers which were deployed in the region to create that armada around Iran. Considering that to be a good enough amount of military blockade or military surrounding of Iran to deter it from entering into or retaliating in the manner that it has, but it has still retaliated and it continues to fight. Considering now, US is now considering boots on ground. There is a 3rd aircraft carrier which is also being considered to be sent into the region, and they're also pulling in military assets from South Korea, these air defenses, the air defense assets. Does this reflect how casually US took Iran until the conflict actually began?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
They would have factored it in. Intelligence was very sound. I mean, if intelligence wasn't sound, then you must argue as to why during the very first hour of the airstrikes just after breakfast time Tehran on Saturday, February 28th, Khamenei was taken out along with members of his family and the other top brass, the intelligence ministry, the interior ministry, so on and so forth. If intelligence wasn't sound, we wouldn't see such spectacular, stunning successes on the part of the Israelis and the Americans, who had more than done their homework. But yes, nobody is denying the fact that Iran has the Strait of Hormuz as its trump card, literally, pun unintended. And it continues to play that because it has nothing else. What it miscalculated foolishly, if I was an Iranian government delegate, I would put it this way, is that, yes, they did mention that they would strike American assets in the region, but then they have gone and attacked military assets, civilian targets, tourist places, airports, hotels, and the like. And this creates panic and fear, which is what it's capitalizing on. These are spectacular, audacious attacks, and that has gotten the news headlines of the world, because what we don't see behind that is a desperate, beleaguered regime. It is not a strong regime that goes and attacks the Fairmont Hotel or Bahrain Airport or Dubai Airport by these attacks. It creates news headlines and it generates fear and attention and insecurity. Nothing more. What it does do also, which is not being picked up, is that this is a scattergun approach by a regime that has nothing to lose and giving it all it could. So that should be seen too, and which explains at the same time as its arsenal is being depleted. And speaking of arsenal, the nuclear strikes of last year's war has led to everything being in operation for over a year now, a calendar year that we're coming up to in June 2026. And whatever is left has been buried in the debris, which of course Iran wants to get to, and of course the IAEA would also like to see, which they haven't seen since last May. But for these ballistic missiles and the drones and the cheaply produced drones, it has nothing else to show for itself as a regime, desperately threatening one and all in the region by drawing into this ring of fire.
You've mentioned the civilian targets across the Gulf regions. There is no denying that. Yes, those have been targeted. These aren't just military assets which are being targeted by Iran. But then the intelligence, there is no doubt that Israel and US, they knew exactly how and where they had to strike. For the Supreme Leader to be assassinated on the first day itself, it says enough. But then there was also a girls' elementary school which was targeted. Over 170 students, largely students, underage girls, who were killed in that attack, largely being blamed onto the US. That's what the initial reports are also suggesting. So there is, it gets murkier as you get into it. There is another argument which says that Tehran or Iran, on the base of their low-cost drones, they are just managing to survive at this point. And for them, it's survival. But for the US, and at least for Trump, the midterm elections is a backward turning clock. So that creates pressure on both sides. And the Strait of Hormuz remains blocked, which is creating ripples across the world. So it only gets murkier as we go further into it. It's kind of becoming who blinks first, whether it's going to be US, whether it's going to be Iran. Iran, whichever way they're managing, they're still not capitulating. So that's another fact which goes in a different argument altogether. Mr. Wagner, thank you so much for joining me here. I apologize if I did not get your name correctly, but it was a pleasure speaking with you. Would look forward to having you on the discussion again.
Thank you.